Hi everybody and welcome to the Saturday Surface Interval in association with Mpora. So today's video is all about what to pack for your scuba diving adventure. Whether that be your very first scuba diving excursion into your scuba diving training, or a trip abroad to go scuba diving, or a trip just at home, just to the local coastline, or just an inland lake. Now everyone and their aunt can come up with a whole list of gear that you should pack with you. I'm sure I've already made a video that I've already completely forgotten about, telling you guys that you should bring your mask, your fins, and your dive computer, but I'm going to look at the other stuff that you need to bring with you on a dive trip. So becoming good at packing dive equipment is a required skill for a lot of dive instructors, because if someone else in the diving group doesn't have something, they've forgotten it, they've left it at home, or something on their dive equipment breaks, then they tend to turn to you and kind of look at you, and as if you're a well-trained magician, you're expected to kind of produce something from behind your back to fix the problem. But you're not always going to have a well-prepared and well-stocked dive instructor with you wherever you're going, and in some places your chances of finding a replacement part for your regulator or your torch or whatever it is are somewhere between 0 and nothing. So let's run through things that you should be packing and how to pack them as well. You can bring all the spare parts in the dive center with you on a dive to fix any and all problems with your dive gear, but if you don't have the tool to actually fit that spare part, then it's not much good, is it? Sure, on a lot of scuba diving equipment, things can be fixed by hand, but most of our dive equipment requires a mixture of basic tools like screwdrivers and wrenches, and some require some really quite specialist tools for one particular nut, which if you don't have, there's not a great deal that you can do, and you're probably going to end up damaging your gear just trying to undo it. Start to build yourself a small toolbox to fix your dive gear. Start with a screwdriver, because they're always handy, a good adjustable spanner, and some Allen keys. They will get you out of a surprising number of problems. Then just go over your dive gear looking for parts that you can change and what tools you may need to change them. One big one that usually crops up as a big problem is Scuba Pro hoses. They all feature those high grip nuts that have lots of teeth, unlike the standard hex nut, so changing Scuba Pro hoses can mean that you end up scratching those sort of hose nuts with a pair of pliers just to get them off, which you don't want to do. So look over all of your dive equipment and see what kinds of fittings you have and what tools you may need if you need to change one particular thing. Once you've collected all of those tools, you may need to look after them, because most tools aren't made for marine environments, so they just rust like hell. Find yourself a decent dry box to store them in, and throw in some of those little silica gel packets, you know, the ones that you've collected in a drawer for this exact reason. So many tools will just rust up from even the shortest exposure to just ocean spray, so it's important to keep your tools clean and dry as well, so that they actually work when you need them to. Years and years ago, I just used to collect all of these rusty sort of adjustable spanners, which just were completely useless because the mechanism didn't work anymore because they were all seized up with rust. So look after your tools and they will still work and they will look after you. Once you have the tools to actually fit them, you of course need the spare or replacement parts to actually repair broken gear. Look over your gear and consider the failure points on each part and what can break on your equipment. Think about how vital each failure point is compared to sort of what's going to happen on your dive. So if this breaks, is it going to ruin my entire dive trip, or is it just going to be an inconvenience? And then what the actual replacement part would be, so you can kind of gauge if it's that particularly big, then maybe it's not worth bringing that spare part. Spare parts are a balancing act. You want to bring everything for every eventuality so you can fix anything, but you can't bring 2 of everything. It's just not practical. You can't bring an extra pair of fins just because they're just too bulky. Have a think about where you're going and what's the most likely thing to break and what would be the worst thing to break. So I'm thinking of cuff seals on my dry suit and batteries for my dive computer, a bit more than spare D-rings and a spare weight belt because they don't tend to break. It's different for each dive trip, but small, lightweight things like batteries and spare cuff seals are very, very easy to throw in a dive bag or a dive box and just keep with you as spares. The same with mast straps and the odd fin strap and a mouthpiece as well. They're nice and small and lightweight, so they'll just kind of fit in your kit bag. If you look after your gear and you check it over in between dives, then you'll end up spotting and fixing potential faults at home, like sort of wear on a hose. If you're kind of cleaning and sort of looking after your regulators, you will see that wear on the hose first and you'll replace the hose before it's a problem. That way you don't need to bring spare hoses with you just in case, although it is worth bringing the odd spare O-ring because they do extrude from time to time. One thing that I've learned during my scuba diving adventuring is to bring a hat wherever I'm going. Whether it's somewhere sunny and warm or cold and snowing, a hat will make a world of difference. Keeping your head protected will keep you happy and healthy no matter the weather. In cold waters, a warm hat will make a cold and wet boat trip back to shore much more comfortable. Keeping your head dry and covered, it will keep your entire body that much warmer and you'll be that much happier and much more practical about doing stuff. The flip side of things, in tropical climates, you're exposed to the intense sun all the time, a lot of the time, if you have very little shelter around you. But if you're in and around the water is actually keeping you cool, so you're not always as aware of the heat of the sun bearing down on you, so sunburn becomes a real problem. A decent sun hat to keep the sun off of your head and your face as well can protect you from the harmful UV rays. They're also quite handy in a rainy day as well. The peak of a baseball cap or a sun hat will keep more than just the sun out of your eyes and face. That peak will actually keep rain, it will keep snow, some ocean spray out of your face and your eyes as well, so you can still work properly. Today's Surface Interval is sponsored by Mpora. Mpora is an online magazine that is all about inspiring adventure. Whether that adventure involves sliding around on a snowy mountain, pulling yourself up on a rock climbing wall, riding your bike through wooded trails, surfing barrels down at the beach, and yes, of course, exploring the underwater world while scuba diving. Mpora is a website that has got you covered. Mpora features interviews, previews of new equipment, reviews of existing equipment, the news, everything that you need to keep yourself clued up on the big outdoor issues. It has everything, so check out Mpora today. Diving uses a surprising amount of energy and you're constantly carrying and moving heavy equipment around whilst wearing quite unusual and quite cumbersome dive equipment. I mean, we literally wear lead weight belts as well, so a sneaky snack will always brighten your day. Now, I usually bring a drink that has lots of flavour in it to get the taste of seawater out of my mouth after a dive, and it also acts to sort of help me stay hydrated. I also like to bring a savoury snack and a sweet snack with me as well on a dive trip, so depending on what I fancy, I have something then and there. Now, I don't tend to bring too much food or drink with me, or anything particularly bulky, because huge meals right before a dive don't always go down too well, or they don't stay down too well. A nice warm drink does go down quite well after a cold dive. It's something nice just to sort of warm your jaw up and also keep your fingers nice and warm so you can do all the kind of fiddly tasks. So a lot of divers like to bring a thermos flask with some sort of hot chocolate or some coffee with them on a dive as well. Local cash is quite handy to bring with you. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of physical, tangible money. I don't tend to carry it around with me when I'm at home, but if I'm going out on a diving trip, then I will go to a cash machine and draw some cash out, because a lot of the places that I end up, they don't take cards, and a lot of places that don't have electricity Don't have Wi-Fi neither, so you can't use that to pay for anything. Cash for an air fill, any kind of spare parts that you may need, snacks and drinks and meals in general, they can be essential in some places and really make the difference between a nice and comfortable dive trip or sitting next to someone who's having a nice and comfortable dive trip because they brought some cash with them. Now, don't go overboard, obviously. You don't want just stacks and stacks of cash on your body whilst you're diving or left in your kit bag on the surface, but make sure that you have enough to cover yourself and any kind of tips that may be expected of you. Cash also doesn't really go off, and I find myself returning to countries I've been to before, so at home I keep the leftover cash stashed away somewhere nice and safely. That way I can use it for my next trip. So if you come back with any excess cash, don't just get rid of it. You don't want to lose out on exchange rates twice on one trip. That's why I don't like to get rid of it. And a few notes and coins from a country that you've been to years and years ago are also a nice reminder of your trip when you look back on them. So there were a few things that I usually pack for a diving trip other than the essentials, your mask, your fins, and your dive computer, obviously. But what do you like to bring with you on a scuba diving trip? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Simply Scuba channel for more scuba diving content. Thank you for watching and safe diving.